live we are now live.
We're on. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us and joining Wednesday Night Live. Delighted to see you all here this evening for our interesting talk with Saul Gaunt. Saul is an advanced paramedic practitioner working for the London Ambulance Service, where he has been working for over 5 years. He also helps train Solar Branch volunteers across the country and is a trustee of the Ambulance Wish Foundation, a charity which helps provide transport to palliative care patients. Outside of ambulance life, he is a scout leader, which I've just found out. He enjoys spending time with his wife, Lindsay, cycling, and most importantly, he enjoys eating. But then who doesn't? No one previously has mentioned their partner, so it is pleasing that 5 months and 22 speakers later, Saul is our first guest to openly state that he enjoys spending time with his wife. He will speak of his experiences as a paramedic. This is real life, true life. So please be aware that though some recollections are uplifting, there are some which you may find distressing. Welcome, Saul. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on to your Wednesday Night Live. It's very exciting to be here with you all today, and thank you so much for inviting me. So today I'm going to be talking about some of my experiences during the COVID pandemic that we've been experiencing. Going to be talking, as we've just said, some true life stories. And some of them might be quite sad, some of them might be quite happy, and it's just to give you that warning that if you need to talk to anybody afterwards, or if you want to have a chat with me afterwards about anything that I've said, please feel free. So I'm going to have a very short PowerPoint in the background, just with some pictures of just some memories of what's been going on for the past couple of months. There's nothing on the pictures, so I'm just going to share that now. He says. So who am I, first of all, is always the first question. So as David said, I'm the first person to mention my wife, and there's a picture of her as well. I'm what you would call the normal, although some people would say far from, good Jewish boy from Northwest London. I was a JFS boy. I went to Brighton University, where I was, of course, the JSOC president. I qualified in 2012. There is me in the top left. I've not changed a bit, some people might say, of me back in my student days. I got married last year to Lindsay, who is in the right. And as we said, I'm a scout leader for my professional life. So I've been a paramedic now for 5 years. I've just been promoted last year to an advanced paramedic focusing in urgent care. So my new role is looking at complex medical cases, complex patients, and trying to keep them at home. And the idea is to try and bring healthcare to the patient. I'm also a hut solo trainer for Northwest, Stamford Hill, Canvey Island, Edgware, and any other new branches that ever come up. And I also have started my own little training company, first aid training, called Good Egg Medical, because I am a good egg. That's kind of me, kind of what I've been doing. And the idea of today is to give you a little bit of an insight into what's been going on in the health service, what's been going on in paramedic life for the past sort of 8 months since the first lockdown in March, all that time long ago. But before I do that, I just wanted to tell you about some of the stats for London Ambulance Service. So London Ambulance Service on a normal day, so I was actually at work today, I came off shift about an hour ago, we receive approximately 4,000 calls, between 4,000 and 5,000 calls to the London Ambulance Service every single day. And that ranges from life-threatening emergencies to non-emergency calls as well. During COVID, during the peak of COVID, so around March, I took the stats, around the middle of March, we were receiving over 13,500 calls on a daily basis. So we were tripling our call volume, to the extent where people were waiting to get on the phone to a 999 operator for up to 15 minutes. So they were waiting on hold to 999. I almost have to laugh at that sometimes, to think that, you know, it's understandable that we wait on the phone when we want to speak to Sky or Virgin, but when you think if you're calling 999, you should be able to get on the phone straight away. And I found it fascinating that, you know, during the peak of COVID, we were waiting 15 minutes just to get on the phone. And we had ambulance delays. So we had delays of getting to patients of over 12 hours. So patients would be waiting, seriously unwell patients would sometimes be waiting 12 hours, 13 hours for an ambulance. And that was really tough. That was really, really tough. It was tough to see the numbers every day. It was tough to see how the peaks would go up and up and up. The number of cases would go up and up and up in COVID, and then the number of calls that we were having was going up and up and up and up and up. And it was really sad to also see the deaths go up and up and up, as well as our call volume. And that was the pressure. So there was this constant pressure of, there are these many calls, we need to be working fast, you know. And I'll talk about this a bit later, but there was a London Ambulance Service at no point ever put pressure on me to come to work, but there is a massive sense of camaraderie where I need to go to work, I need to help out, you know, not just the London Ambulance Service, but, you know, the rest of the ambulance services, the hospitals across London that were struggling. And the pressure really, really mounted throughout March and throughout April. And I really started to feel it during it. But before we talk about during COVID, I want to say that I have the best job in the world as a paramedic. And you're going to hear some of the really sad things that happened during the coronavirus pandemic, but actually that's not what my job is about. This pandemic is a small part of my career, if you like. This is the kind of stuff we do, you know, just having fun on the ambulance while we do it, well, you know, and making jokes and just having fun while, you know, with our colleagues and things. And I do the London Marathon every year, so I'm part of the marathon medical team who go around looking after patients at the marathon. I get loads of really funky pictures like this, where we stand in front of London monuments and go around making sure that everybody's safe at the marathon days. And we deliver babies. So I've delivered coming up to 7 babies. So the first thing that those babies see is my face, which great for them. Which is always such a highlight of our job. This one, I run part of the Twitter account, part of the official Twitter account for London Ambulance Service. So these are all kind of tweets that I've posted throughout the years. And this one popped up. So this was Omar, who was born at 10:20 in the morning. He decided not to wait any longer. We were literally arriving outside Northwick Park Hospital, and the baby decided he couldn't wait any longer to get inside and decided he was going to be born on my ambulance and make a lot of mess. But he was, none of them unfortunately have been named after me, which was a big shame. And then part of my other sort of love in life is I also, as I said, I train Heart Solar. So face-to-face training for Heart Solar was happening before COVID and still is. Happening on Zoom and things. And then in the middle is my other passion, which is the Ambulance Wish Foundation, which is a charity that I'm now a trustee of and also a branch manager for for London. So we take palliative care patients to their final wishes. And something I'll never forget was we had a load of wishes booked for kind of April, May time, so kind of, you know, peak COVID time. And we had wishes where we were taking patients, you know, end of life care patients in their final stages of their life to their final wishes. We had one booked where we were taking the patient to a restaurant just to have a meal with their family. Their final wish was a meal with their family in their favorite restaurant. And I remember COVID was hitting. It was just about when the schools closed. And I took a walk on the South Bank, because that's where I was working at the time in Waterloo. I took a walk on the South Bank and I realized that I had to cancel all these wishes and I had to stop all these wishes. And I had to call the families to tell them that because of COVID, we weren't going to be able to do the final wishes for these people. And that was one of that almost to even before coronavirus started and was getting really, really big for us in the ambulance service. It was getting really big for me, and we had to stop some really important wishes. This is a picture from one of the first wishes I did with two of my amazing volunteers, who we took a patient to, so there was no ambulance service in the country that would do this journey, which was a 5-minute journey from a care home in from a patient's house in Wales round the corner to a care home where his wife lived. So they lived apart. So we drove from London. We started at 5 in the morning. We drove from London, picked him up from his home, drove him around the corner to the care home, and they saw each other for the last time, which is that top left-hand picture. That was unbelievable, and that kind of just reminds me why I do everything, why I keep going with corona, why I keep going with COVID and things, for just to remind myself that we're going to get back to normality eventually, and I can go back out to do wishes. So then it happened, as it were. Then it happened. So these are kind of the pictures and you know what kind of happened, and so. As I said to you, I'm one of the advanced paramedics, and what happened with us is we were immediately pulled off the road. So I'm normally in a car or an ambulance, and we were immediately pulled off the road and placed into a control room like that one in the top picture. And that was very different for me. So now when I'm in the car, I can't really see the hundreds of calls that are happening across London. You know, it's just me in my car. You know, I've got my one job, my one patient, I get on with it. I'm now in the control room. I can see those 10,000, you know, those calls, those 10,000 calls constantly coming in. And they had a clock they had like a pie chart in the control room that would tell you how long the people were waiting. And that was really tough to see. So you would see that people were waiting 10, 15 minutes just to get on the phone to 999. I can't imagine what those people, you know, somebody could have been having a heart attack, in cardiac arrest, not breathing, and the family members or people around them were not able to get on the phone to even request an ambulance at one point, you know, for 15 minutes. It got to the point where BT, so when you call 999, it goes, hello, which service? So what they decided to do was those people who said, hello, which service, actually began triaging and looking at what patients were, you know, which patients we needed to get in quickly on the 999 service and stuff. And working in the control room was really difficult. We were given the task to basically try and work out who needed an ambulance, who could be safely discharged to the community. So you know, speak to their GP, speak to a different team, and who could wait. And we had to categorize that. And lots of jobs, really. This for me, you know, people talk about PTSD, people talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and how COVID really affected, you know, me. And this is where it affected me. So a number of calls like kind of stick out for me. So apologies to anyone who didn't want to hear a gory story, but you know, so I remember speaking to a gentleman on the phone who I could tell was having a stroke, and we built in some technology so that we could almost FaceTime or, you know, video call a patient, and what happened was that, you know, what I could see was that patient was having a stroke. And, you know, what I had to do was decide, you know, can I get this patient to hospital now? Can I get them an ambulance? And with the rest of, you know, people were waiting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours for ambulances at one point. I realized I was not going to get this patient an ambulance. And I remember having to tell the son of this patient to get his dad by the hand and put him in his own car and tell him to drive him to hospital, because that was the only way he was going to get to hospital. I phoned the hospital, told them what was happening, etc., etc. And I think he was fine, but it just showed the absolute pressure and the absolute kind of stress that we were under. We had another one that's really sticks in my mind was I came in the morning And what I liked to do in the morning was I was working, 50, 60-hour weeks at one point, just because, not because under the ambulance service asked me to. It was all extra. I got paid for it, but it was all extra. And because there was this element of, I feel like I need to work. I feel like I need to work. I need to support the service. I need to do this. But, I would get in the morning. And one of the first things I would do is review some of the calls that were being held. And I remember seeing this call, and it just kind of stuck out for me. It was a call that had been waiting 12 hours for an ambulance, which wasn't that big at that point. And, and it was a call where I kind of said to them, I rang them back and I said, what's happening, blah, blah. And we had a chat on the phone, and it turned out that she had a miscarriage the night before. And she had been waiting that long for an ambulance. And when I spoke to her on the phone, she was getting more and more unwell. She was really, really unwell by the time I spoke to her on the phone. And I don't know how, we'll call it magic, that I managed to find her something somewhere to go and get her some help. So I managed to get her a car with rapid response cars, managed to get someone to go around there, and they told me how unwell this patient was and things like that. And it just reminded me of, COVID is one thing. We've got so many patients who are getting unwell from COVID, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But then you've also got the other bits. COVID is happening, but then also we go to patients who fall on the floor, which is a really normal older people who have fallen on the floor. And, those people are going to remain on the floor. And, and we have to balance that as an ambulance service. And we actually did really well to try and balance the demand that was coming in. And, that's why we were put in the control room to try and manage this. And so, and that was really tough. And then I remember seeing her on FaceTime again. And I remember seeing this little kid running past, and it just made it real again. I was like, this is a patient's mum, and really, really tough to kind of see. And as I said, the pressure was just there to kind of help everybody. I wanted to help everybody. COVID related calls during the pandemic was really difficult as well, because we didn't know a lot about coronavirus right at the beginning. I'm going back to kind of March, April time, and people would want testing. People would want testing. We were reserving those tests right at the beginning for kind of in hospital, and explaining to people that they would just need to kind of wait it out. If you called 999 or 111 back in March and you wanted a COVID test, you weren't getting a COVID test. You were told that unless you went to hospital, you just needed to sweat it out. You just needed to wait for yourself to get better. And that was really tough to tell people, to just kind of try and get better. If you get better, great. If you don't, call us back. And that was really tough, because we also were trying not to send ambulances to COVID. We were trying to reserve them for the people who are really unwell from COVID. And that was really, really difficult. But then we did really interesting jobs as well. So there was, I delivered a baby over FaceTime with one of the midwives in the control room, which was just unbelievable. We managed to, there was delays in getting the ambulances, as we know, and we managed to deliver a baby using the sister of the mother and over FaceTime, which was just an unbelievable. I'm a bit of a geek and a bit of a tech nerd, and to be able to do that, to be able to combine those things, was just fantastic. And then I also went out on the road. So me and my scuba goggles on the far right, that was the kind of PPE that we wore right at the beginning. So we had an apron, gloves, mask, and eye goggles. From that was every single patient that we thought was COVID would get this right at the beginning. Then we moved to kind of nowish, where we wear face masks to every single patient we go to. So every patient where an ambulance is called, or where you see in the hospital, you'll get somebody wearing a face mask, and gloves and eye protection as well. So seeing patients out in COVID was really difficult as well. So I was dispatched on the car. So I would do a few sort of a few shifts in the control room a week, and then a few shifts on the car a week. And it was interesting seeing them on the car, going to patients and sort of explaining to them that they didn't need to go to hospital, and kind of making sure they were safe at home. But then on top of that, it was really difficult because the whole hospital, all the hospital setup was really difficult. People didn't want to go to hospital, and also hospitals didn't really want COVID patients who were well there. You know, it was a really difficult balance to work out who needed to go to hospital and who didn't need to go to hospital. And those who needed to go to hospital were really, really sick, and there wasn't much of an in between. And I remember going to one patient who was an end-of-life care patient. And essentially, he needed a relatively simple procedure done. But because of COVID, it made it absolute nightmare. Essentially, he needed to be catheterized. And I phoned everybody. I tried to phone everybody. And just everybody was so busy that they weren't able to come out and help. And the family, I said to him, look, we need to take him to hospital. And the family went, no, we don't want him to die of COVID in hospital. We'd rather he died at home in pain. And that was absolutely heartbreaking. I got back in the car and genuinely thought I had failed because I couldn't help this man in his final hours. As we all know, at the peak of COVID, you weren't allowed to go to hospital. So when you had patients, when your relatives were going into hospital, you weren't allowed to go with. And that made for some really awkward conversations sometimes of, you know, we're taking in dad who's really, really unwell, and this might be it. You might not be able to see him, and this might be it. And there was quite a few times where I had to say to family members, say goodbye to your dad, to your mum, because I'm concerned he's not going to make it. And that was so difficult. I would have to, so it was really difficult. It was another case where I put the man on the hospital, on the ambulance, and I said, you know, do you want to cut, you know, the family said, can they come with? And I said, no, you can't come with. The hospitals won't allow it, and we're not allowed to take family members at the moment. And the family absolutely broke down because they knew what was going to happen to their dad. I knew what was going to happen to his dad, and his dad knew what was going to happen, that he was unlikely to survive it. He was very, very unwell. And that was a really tough discussion. And I said, you know, you need to call the hospital in a couple of hours. And there was methods, and the hospitals got fantastic at providing support to those families. But it was really difficult to explain to the families, this is what's going to happen and this is why it's happening. And that was kind of what happened during COVID and what we were doing. And then we also, just some of the other things I kind of put on the screen. So in the middle was the whole key worker thing. So this was a campaign that was put up by a paramedic down in Seacam. And this was all about, you know, the fact that we can't go shopping during the day because we're working and stuff like that. And I think that kind of highlights some of the issues that loads of key workers, and I'm not just saying paramedics, but hospital workers, nurses, teachers, everybody who was sort of at work and having to go to work sort of struggled with, was that, you know, it was really, sometimes, you know, you get to the store and there was nothing left when you finish work. And that was really interesting. And then I'm sure this was a similar occurrence to everybody sort of around the country, but me and my wife on Pesach, on Passover, you know, normally having 13 or 14 or 15 or minimum around the table, you know, any number of my family, and to go down to 2 was just really almost like I've had like a, you know, a horrendous couple of months, and then, you know, I can't even have Seder, you know, the big Seder that we all want. And that was really tough. That was really, really tough. But it wasn't all bad. I had some really good support at home. All of my family were fantastic throughout. So on the top left, one of the big card companies, Moonpig equivalent, were doing this thing where you could send like greeting cards to key workers. So my wife, Lindsay, mentioned her again, would actually arranged for me to receive 12 or 13 cards, which was lovely. And then I didn't pay for a meal for the first couple of months. We had so much food delivered up to London Ambulance Service, which is the top left and the bottom left and the top right. We actually had a lady from Finchley cook a meal for us for 200 people in London Ambulance Service every Tuesday and Thursday. She cooked us food. And it's unbelievable. And then just the middle picture is so Ambulance Wish Foundation, because we weren't able to do wishes, a volunteer of mine suggested, and we supported, to kind of use the ambulance to deliver food instead. So there was a few times where I went out with Lindsay and we delivered food to sort of either to the ambulance service, to hospitals we were doing it to, and that continued right up until only a couple of weeks ago, where we were doing sort of homeless shelters and stuff like that. So we kind of made a good thing out of that, and that's just me in the middle with delivering my baby with the consultant midwife next to me. So it was a really interesting time throughout COVID, and how it kind of affected me and how it affected the service and the pressure of it all. But I think it's really important to remember that we had some amazing support from the community, from the family, from everybody. And actually what was so almost made it more difficult was when I was calling people to tell people, you're not getting an ambulance, or there's not going to be an ambulance for hours and hours and hours. Most of them would just turn around and go, okay. And that was, you almost want them to shout at you and to say, oh, I can't believe I'm not doing that, because then it just made it easier. But the fact that they just turned around and went, okay, and their voice would just change, it was really tough when they almost just gave up and they just went, okay, we'll just have to deal with it. And that was really interesting and really, really difficult. That dad, as I said, the gentleman who was having a stroke, his son just turned around when I said, you should put him in a cab. You should drive him yourself to hospital. Just turned around and went, okay, I will. And I said, I'm really sorry. And he went, don't be, I understand. And that, I've never heard that when I've done this, because I've been doing like telephone triage for ages before COVID. And people shout at you when you can't get an ambulance. They get really angry because they're in a high stress situation. But people would just turn around and go, okay. And that almost made it more difficult. So how is it now? COVID is not going away. COVID's not going away. I'm now acting as a contact tracer. So I work from home doing contact tracing. So I help to tell people that they've got COVID or they've been in contact with somebody who's got COVID. As you can imagine, the reactions to that is somewhat varied. So I've been called rather rude names and told that they're not going to self-isolate under any circumstances, which has been quite interesting. But the role is essentially that I will phone people who have been in contact with somebody with coronavirus, and I will explain to them that they need to self-isolate, that they need to remain at home, do they need any support? And then I'll find out kind of where they've been to try and, piece together where the virus is going. You'd think people would be kind of quite happy to stay at home and make sure that they are doing what the law now says to do, but unfortunately myself and some of my colleagues have been told on different ways that we should go away and that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. The call volume has dropped. We're now back to kind of 4,000, 5,000 calls a day, but COVID calls are back up again. So I went to work today, as I said, I went to 7 patients, and 3 of them were COVID patients. They were either respiratory, so they had those signs of COVID, or they were actually positive for COVID and not very well. So COVID is going back up. And I kind of just wanted to just use this opportunity to kind of just remind everybody of the basics. And I'm not gonna, I really wanted you guys to be able to hear what I've done, but also be able to ask any questions you might have. So I'm gonna just talk about this bit as well, is to just really remember the basics. And the basics of it are that we must hands face to face, that COVID is not going away. COVID, as we know, we're coming out of this lockdown, and COVID calls are going back up and up and up and up and up and up. And we have to remember that we are still within this pandemic. And if you have any of the symptoms, as we know what the symptoms are, so if you have a cough, a fever, or if you lose your sense of taste or smell, then you need to go and get a test. And you can get a test using 119. So that's the 119, not 111, 119, or you can order them online as well. And if you're told to self-isolate by NHS Test and Trace, by anybody like that, you must do that. You must follow the guidance. I know it's annoying. I know that it's not what you want to be doing, but we really need to be doing that. We need to keep the R number coming down. You know, they've opened up for Christmas, which is fantastic. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep ourselves all safe and to keep our families safe. And with that, I hope that gives you kind of like a little piece of kind of what I've been doing over the past couple of months. I didn't want to ramble on and give you loads of crying stories, but I think for me, as I said, the big things is that I you know, the pressure was unbelievable. And we were doing unbelievable things as an ambulance service, and we were really pulling out all the stops to make sure that London was still safe. And now that we're coming out towards the other end, I look back at the unbelievable things that I did as a paramedic, and you know, also the kind of risky things that I did to try and help people, and like putting a stroke patient in their own car. And then also, you know, how the support we got from the community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, my wife, my family, the support was unbelievable. I didn't pay for a coffee for about 4 months, which was a highlight. And then just reminding you all of the kind of hands, face, space kind of thing that they've been talking about. And to just be really careful while you're out there. And also just, I know it's really topical recently, but I know that recently there was a tragedy in Radlett, as we all know, of what happened over there with the young girl. Please, however you do it, online, face to face, please find a way of doing a first aid course so that you know what to do in the situation of any type of emergency. So that's it from me. I've been rambling on.
No, you haven't. Thank you, Saul. It's most interesting and extremely heartfelt, and I'm sure everybody's much the same feeling as I have, that your job, however much you enjoy it, and probably enjoy is the wrong word, but I cannot begin to imagine how tough it's been for you, especially over those early months of March and April. And I just wonder, as somebody's asked a question, actually, if you could take it off the screen view.
Yes.
Do that. I'll just say, before I come up with to talk to you, if anybody wishes to ask a question, if you go into participants, you go to your name, if you would like to raise your virtual hand, do not wave. We cannot see you because the only person I can see is Saul. And if you wish to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand or raise it through the chat room. Thank you. So somebody was asked a question of how many times you're tested, but my question linked to that is, have you at all been concerned throughout the period of actually catching COVID yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have, but then everybody, you know, just on a point that you mentioned that, you know, my job is really, really hard, but I just want to say that also the job of every single key worker throughout this has been hard, and everybody who's had to go to work and had to be frontline and teach, you know, that doesn't just, you know, teachers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, everything like that. And I've just noticed my sister's asked a question that's going to make everyone giggle. I would, but yes, in regards to catching, yes, I have been worried about catching coronavirus. Of course I had, but I think, you know, I've worn the PPE, I followed the guidelines, which is really, really important. And if I ever had symptoms, I would obviously go and get tested, and that was the most important thing. But yeah,
have you been tested ordinarily? Have you throughout the period?
So NHS and key workers and things like that have not been tested periodically throughout. We were tested, I've been tested a couple of times, but so asymptomatic, which is when you don't have any symptoms, testing is starting like now-ish. we're going to be having, you know, those really quick 15-minute tests they've been all talking about. So we're going to be getting, which should be, I don't know when they're coming out, but I think it was Matt Hancock was saying that we're going to be getting those as well. But if we ever needed a test, so if we ever had symptoms or we were concerned, we would have the possibility of getting a test. That was never an issue.
No. I know that on the BBC today there was news about the London Ambulance Service paramedics who were visiting elderly people rather than the elderly people going to hospital to try and get round the situation. Is that something you deal with?
So yeah, so my job in itself is, as I say, the urgent care. So whenever we go to patients, we try and keep as many people at home as possible. That's just the London Ambulance Service as a whole and paramedics as a whole. And you know, one of the things that we do is obviously try and keep people at home, and that's what my job is all about. And so London Ambulance Service will send specialist paramedics to care homes and things like that to try and keep them at home.
Okay, there are questions filtering through. Well, before I read them, there's somebody called Stephen Gaffson who wants to ask you a question. I'm asking you to unmute. If you could unmute yourself, Stephen.
Yeah, hi Saul.
Hi.
Hiya. So my question is, the decision's now been made for families to get together or allowed to get together over the festive period. I appreciate there's a lot of government political decisions being put together to come up with that. But as a paramedic, are you worried about this decision? And what do you think would be the ramifications in January because of this?
So I saw, I know that everyone's been sort of taking the mickey out of when Boris said, oh, it's the time to be jolly, and also the time to be jolly careful. And for once, I actually really liked that he said that. And I think it's really important that, yes, we have this, this free ticket to go out and sort of mingle with three other families or whatever, two other families, three families can mix together. But I think it's really important to remember that the virus hasn't gone away. The virus doesn't remember it's Christmas, doesn't know it's Christmas. And actually, what I would say is that at the end of the day, each family needs to make their own risk assessment almost to decide whether or not it's appropriate. You know all about risk assessments. So, each family needs to work out what kind of and what precautions they're going to take if they choose to do, if they choose to meet up with other families. On what I think it will do in January, I think it's obviously going to make the rate go up. That's just obvious. And then we'll have to see how, are we going to have the vaccine at that point? There's so many ifs that we don't know what's going to happen, that I don't know the answer to what will happen in January. But if you allow lots of people to get together, the rate's going to go up. And I would just say to everybody that they need to make sure that they think about the ramifications of getting together if they've got elderly relatives or people who are vulnerable.
Thank you. It's interesting that the AstraZeneca vaccine is going to be used in 4 states in America from mid-December. I'm not sure that the UK would be there because I think we carry out more testing, but you may know more on that than that.
All I know is that we're doing it's under the regulatory testing now. There's a list of people who are going to get it first, second, third, etc. So that will be, once it goes through regulatory, it will then be decided who gets it.
If I was a conspiracy theorist, of course, I'd ask the question, how come 4 companies came up with the vaccine at the same time?
I'm not going down that route.
No, me neither. Somebody's asking the question just to do with opening up and families meeting up. And of course, the question exists is, what do you suggest we do over Hanukkah, which is obviously the same over Christmas. But also, is it really fantastic that we're allowed to get together for the festive season? And of course, within that, the government has stated that for every day over the Christmas period that we are out of the lockdown, that we can meet people, we will have to have 5 days of lockdown in January. So if we have 5 days over Christmas, it's 25 days of lockdown in January.
There you go. But I just, you mentioned over Hanukkah, and I think Hanukkah just is before when all the Christmas is unlocked in inverted commas. So just make sure that you follow the tiers when we go back into them. When we find out about tiers, I think tomorrow, just make sure that you follow which tier you're in and follow the guidelines depending on where you are.
You're working Christmas Day?
This is a running joke in my family, so I apologise. But yes, I end up working every Christmas Day, and they like to remind me that I like to moan about it. But yes, I am. Thank you, Georgia, and whoever else wrote that. I am working Christmas Day this year, and Boxing Day, and New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. It's just the short straw I pulled this year.
Well, why not? Somebody has to do it, but I'm sure you make up for it in other ways. Now, out of interest, how has the trauma of so many cases and so many deaths affected you and colleagues of yours?
I think this is.
What have you got used to it?
Yeah, I think we've now got used to it. And I think, as I said to you throughout, like, COVID itself wasn't the problem. It was everything else. It was the everything else. It was the fact that COVID was causing problems with everything else that we were doing. And I talk about, I always talk about, I'm happy to talk about, how it's affected me. And, my PTSD, if you like, is just to do with, post-traumatic stress, if you like. And I don't use that term lightly. Is all to do with numbers and clocks. So if somebody kind of says you have 4 hours to get somewhere, that kind of triggers something to go, because that was how long people were waiting for ambulances. And I was telling people that they need to wait 10 hours. So sometimes telling me an amount of hours just triggers something, back in there. And then just really high numbers again also triggers things. Nothing to do with COVID itself. Again, we've just got on with it. That's the bit we've got on with, but it's the other bits. So it's numbers and hours that's kind of the bit which has affected me.
Yeah, there was a study carried out that a few months ago saying that people in their over 50 were concerned with the fact that they couldn't be treated for their other illnesses. They couldn't go to doctors, they couldn't go to hospital, they couldn't go to dentists. And so there may have been underlying illnesses that would affect them in later life, but obviously they couldn't, there wasn't the opportunity to be seen by anybody because of everybody being in hospital for COVID, and it was taking over.
I actually think that's quite a misconception, actually, is that
okay.
people thought that there was a lot of people who thought the NHS was closed. And yes, there was a lot of things that were pushed back, but at no point could you not get if you needed emergency treatment, you would get emergency treatment. And, especially now, this is a really good point. And what I really want to say is that the NHS, as they've been saying all over, is very much open. Right now, you can, even though COVID's back on the rise and there's lockdown, GP surgeries are taking patients they're taking patients on the phone, I know, but they're talking to people over the phone, they're doing appointments, dentists are open this time during lockdown. There's lots and lots of things that are now open that weren't open last time necessarily, but the NHS is very much open. And if you have an urgent or life-threatening emergency, you need to call 999, you need to call 111, you need to go to hospital, and you will get the help you need.
Interestingly, it was a personal thing, but I was unwell, I think it was Christmas Eve 2 years ago. And my wife called an ambulance, and how long did they say? It was a couple of hours for the ambulance. So she phoned Hatsola, and they were round in about 15 minutes. And it shows how fantastic Hatsola can be for those people who don't know Hatsola, but certainly in Edgware and other areas of northwest London, they perform fantastically. And actually, they had me in hospital long before the ambulance itself would have been.
Yeah, and that is really that is really important to remind people about Hatsola. But
I'm not denigrating the London ambulance service.
No, but it is really important.
They were, and
yeah. But it's also really important that that people don't if they need London, if they think they need London Ambulance Service, to make sure they call London Ambulance Service as well. Almost have two phones on your ears, kind of thing.
Yeah. There's somebody else asking, White Hawk, is there a reliable antibody test?
The one the NHS does, that you can get on the NHS. I've had one done for social work, for health and social care, and they're starting to push it out across other people. But there is, just personally, getting an antibody test doesn't necessarily prove anything. So apparently still I don't have antibodies. But I've been around COVID patients for ages, so who knows? All I would say is that if you want to get an antibody test, feel free, but make sure you read into it first. I wouldn't want to tell anybody to go to any certain company or certain test.
And Faye Rosen is asking, what made you choose this line of career?
My whole family almost is pretty much medical. Dad, doctor, mum, podiatrist, uncles who are dentists, a grandma who was a dentist, every sort of covered head to toe. I think for me, I always kind of wanted to go into the medical kind of ground, and actually my dad, so I was in the hospital one day on some work experience, and my dad actually turned around, I remember this, and he said, why don't you go out with the paramedics for a laugh? I won't let him forget that. And it was a laugh, first of all. It was an absolute laugh, so he was completely right. And I had the most unbelievable time just kind of doing the basic jobs that they kind of did. And then I didn't do so well in my A-levels, hold my hand up, and I swapped my A-levels. I wanted to do I swapped my A-levels to do paramedics, and I did it, as I said, at university. But yeah, it all started from when I did some work experience in my dad's hospital when I was about 14, 15.
If anybody wishes to ask a question. Oh,
hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Saul. Does being Jewish impact on your work in any way?
So it does impact me. I think, to be honest, sometimes it makes me. I don't think it impacts me in the sense of like, I don't think I've never been sort of like had anti-Semitic abuse or anything. Do you know what I mean? But on top of it, like sometimes it kind of makes me understand a bit more about obviously our culture, which is good. I understand what we kind of things that we need to do, or if we need to, burial rights and stuff like that is really important for us, and I understand all of that bit. But then on the flip side, it also makes me appreciate other religions a lot more, because I understand that if we've got our things, then other religions are going to have their things that they need to do, and I'm really, really hot on trying to pick up on those things. I don't think being Jewish impacts me. I mean, not Orthodox, so thankfully, it doesn't affect me working on Shabbos or things like that. But I think, to be honest, for me, it's all about how it allows me to kind of support other religions.
But you would be probably saving lives anyway on a Shabbos, so technically, presumably, it'll be all right.
Yes, of course. But I mean, to be honest, it's still, I think somebody who, if they were Orthodox, would probably potentially not want to work on a Saturday. But for me,
And is delivering babies the best bit of your job?
It's messy, I can tell you that, but no, delivering babies is lovely. It's a lovely part of the job. It's a small part of the job, but it's a really nice thing to do. It's really nice to be there for the woman as well, to be there to support her through that. And I think it's really important that we are there, supporting everybody. Then it's not all about me. It's more about the patient.
Thank you.
Somebody's asking a question. I think I know the answer you'll give, but they're asking the question of, once the vaccine is released and people receive it, does that mean that people will be able to travel freely, without having to comply with lockdowns?
No idea. I'm not Matt Hancock. I don't know. If you could get him on Wednesday Night Live, maybe you could ask that question.
Yeah, he'll skirt around the issue.
Yeah.
Is anybody out there? Is anybody who wishes on a question? I'm just going to. I just wonder if we're out of COVID times, and normally of your time and service that you do, out of the interest of what proportion of the people have self-induced injuries as opposed to life-threatening, or those which they could not avoid, injuries or illnesses? So
self-inflicted is a really interesting term.
I mean the drug and the drugs and so on and so forth.
So what I think we need to remember about like drinking and drugs is, yes, sometimes it's because people do it to excess, but then also we have to remember that alcohol use and drug use can be some form of mental health issues as well, and those people actually do genuinely need our help. And I think if we go down the line of like, what's self-induced, what's not induced, what's induced, I think that's a really dangerous line to toe. And I don't think, as I say, if somebody goes to the pub and drinks a load of alcohol, or goes to the club and has a load of MDMA or another club drug, that's self-induced, fine. But then we have to remember that there are a load of people out there who have alcoholism, who are alcohol dependent, and that is a mental health. It can be a mental health condition, and those people need our help just as much as anybody else. And I don't think I think we have to remember that when we talk about self-induced.
I think that's a really good answer. Actually, it's from your perspective, that's a really good answer and very interesting. There's another question here. How did you feel about when everybody came out? I think it was on a Thursday evening, which we've cleared. Well, we could do tomorrow if they bring it back. Clapping for the NHS.
Oh, I was so embarrassed. Oh, it was horrible. It was. Do you know what? It was lovely the first like week or two, and then I think it got to the point where we have to remember that this is my job. Like, as my dad is a doctor, my mum's a podiatrist, we're all in this, we're all doing this as our kind of careers. And even wife's a teacher, my stepmom used to work in the school, all of those kind of things is those, we're all doing those jobs because those are our jobs. And we're now in a pandemic and we have to deal with that. And that is what we have to continue doing. The clap was lovely. The first week. It was lovely the second week. It then got really cringy. I didn't like going out to it. Lindsay would sometimes be like, come on, let's go. And it was horrible. They'd all get their pans out and bang. It was lovely. It was lovely that people cared enough to do it, but I think it got to the point of like, there are so many other people who deserve that clap as well. We have to remember, like, I even want to bring up like the people who supported the IT companies, the IT support people who, made sure that people could work from home. They deserved a clap. There were so many other people who deserved a clap, not just the NHS, where I was just doing my job, really.
Yeah. Have there ever been an occasion where you've, I presume the term is blue lighting, where the ambulance has broken down on the way to the hospital? Oh
God, I mean, these ambulances do like hundreds of thousands of miles a year, and so you can imagine that they do break down. Thankfully, I mean, I've broken a few myself. I've crashed a few. That's I'll put my hands up. But like, these things happen when you're driving so many miles. That's the deal. lots of ambulances crash down, break down. What happens is we get another one.
The patient who's in the back.
I look after them and we get another one.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. You deal with it.
Yeah.
Somebody else asking a question, where are we? How do you think COVID may change the way the ambulance service operates? I
think it's going to change healthcare as a whole. like as a whole, I think it's going to change like healthcare. I think you're going to see more digital. I really genuinely think you're going to see more digital like healthcare. So a lot more of like picturing people, like as in like kind of phone calls and telephone triage over the phone. And I think it's taught us a lot about like the healthcare in general, about how people need healthcare, how the needs of patients change all the time, and I think that's really important, that we are able to adapt and change really, really quickly if we need to.
There's another one here. When do we expect AWF will start with wishes again?
Oh, this is the $1 million question. So AWF is the Ambulance Wish Foundation, as we said before. This is my little other baby. So the Ambulance Wish Foundation we're getting some new ambulances, which is really, really exciting. And then we're hopefully going to be starting taking wishes again. I am absolutely really hoping that we should be able to take the Ambulance Wish Foundation wishes sort of January, February time. I hope it's soon. I hope it's tomorrow, but we'll just have to wait and see. We've got wishes coming in at the moment that are constantly requiring. I don't know if it was Uncle Alan or Auntie Sandy who asked that question, but whoever did ask the question, Auntie Sandy, to help out to research them.
Okay. We should have you back in a couple of weeks just to see how much your bottle of whiskey behind you has dropped in level. So, somebody else asked the question. I know Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in medical intervention, but to your knowledge, have you been called to help someone who is?
No, is the answer to that. I've not been involved with Jehovah's Witnesses. I've been involved with like other religious issues. So I mean, there's Jewish people who don't want, there's Jewish women who don't want men to assist them. There's all kinds of different religious issues that we tackle on a daily basis. And being Jewish has helped me to understand that people have different requirements in their religion that I have to be really okay about and have to be able to cater for.
Okay, thank you. We are fast approaching the hour of 9 o'clock, which is our hour into this. There are no further questions that I can see. So I would like to say thank you so much for being here this evening. It's been really interesting. And as I said before, extremely heartfelt. We applaud you for the work you do, though it is your job. It's not an easy job. And you do a lot of great work, and everybody appreciates what you and all of your colleagues do, and for the NHS in itself. And for that, I thank you. I thank you for giving up your evening for us. I know this is your night off, and I know you, as you said, you work 50, 60 hours a week. So, and I know that you like to spend, according to what you told me, you enjoy spending time with Lindsay, so perhaps the rest of the evening you can talk to her directly rather than through here. Yeah,
and don't forget, obviously, working Christmas as well.
Yeah, and that as well.
Yeah,
before everybody leaves us, I'd just like to say that next week at 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening, we have Matthew Offord with us. He is the Conservative MP for the Hendon constituency, and he will be talking about COVID. Where do we go now? And talking about what the future is, where we've been, and hopefully more insight into where the government are going with this. And anybody who has any local issues, please do join us and speak to us and speak to Matthew. He will be most pleased to answer any questions that you may have. Please tell other people about that. And I thank you for that. I thank each and every one of you for being here this evening. I wish you well. You should all go from here in good health. You should have no need to call an ambulance for quite some time. Do an evening off, and please be well always, and enjoy the rest of the week and have a good weekend. And for a month's time, I wish you all a happy new year. Thank you again, Saul. A most interesting evening. Thank you. Phil?
Would you like me to unmute everyone, or
There's 46 of them to unmute. Yeah.
I can press one button though? I'll stop the live stream.
No, what I meant was the